Good morning, everyone. My name is Luciani Bauker. Most of you know me. I'm the clerk for Schools Forum. I make it 10 o'clock. I've just gone live on YouTube. And this morning is the first meeting of the new academic year. And we need to elect a chairman for the new academic year of 22-23. So could I please have nominations for the chairman? Brian?
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Paul.
Can anybody second that?
Shirley got in there first.
Please put your microphone and your camera on if you want to speak. Can anybody second that proposal?
I'm happy to second the proposal.
Thank you. Could I have a vote by a show of hands, please? We're voting on Paul Miller to be the chairman for the new academic year. I can see a lot of hands going up. I think that's unanimous, so I'm going to hand it over to Paul. Paul, you've been elected chairman for the new academic year.
Thank you, Lucian. Thank you, Lucian. Thank you, colleagues. The second item on the agenda is to elect a vice chair. If I may, I'd like to nominate Brian as the vice chair for the coming year. Is there anybody that would second that, and or are there others, forgive me, that would like to stand? Other nominations?
Again, I'm happy to second for Brian.
Thank you, Sal. Are there any other nominations for Vice Chair of School Forum? If not, then could I ask colleagues to vote by raising their hand? Lucian, I can't count. I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Can you see that as well?
Yes, that's what I see.
Thank you. Then we've got 9. It's a unanimous vote for Brian as vice chair. Can I thank you all? If you'd like to put your hands down, thank you. And thank you all for the confidence asking Brian and I to chair School Forum for the next year. Hope we meet your expectations. I hope we have met them in the past and hope we meet them again in the next period of time. We will go through a governance review towards the end of this academic year, and we did one a couple of years ago. We'll do another one to make sure that the processes and procedures that we adopt and use are meeting your requirements. I'd also like to thank all of you for your wisdom and contribution over the last year. I'm sure it will continue into this year. I'd also like to thank the officers, particularly over the last year, in what has been quite a difficult period of time. The quality of the information, the transparency of the information, and your commitment to sharing it with us has been outstanding. And it just seems to continue to improve year on year. So thank you all very much for that. If I can move into the main part of the meeting, please. Colleagues may see a couple of new names on our participants list. You will see, I think Stacey Wetters has joined us. Stacey is one of our colleagues at DFE and is a guest for the day. I can't see a full list, but I think we may also be expecting a colleague called Patrick Grant as well from DFE. So if you see their names come up in the list, they're guests. I can also see a few names on the list that are new in terms of my knowledge. Carey and is it Carey?
Hi, yes, I've just been asked to come and observe. So I work in the Children's Commissioning team.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome. You're welcome to join us. And is it Chris Conniam? Is it Chris Conniam? I can't.
Yeah, that's right, Paul. I'm deputising for Amanda. I've been on here before.
I think you're in there, and that's why I got the C as Chris. Lovely, thanks, Chris. Deputising for Amanda. Is there anybody else? Forgive me, who I'm looking down this. Hayley, I think we've met before. I think everybody else. Pat Harvey.
Yes, hello. I
Hello,
was
Pat.
meditating as well. Thank you. Education project accountant. Well, thank you.
Welcome. Excellent. Oh, goodness me, what have we done today to be so privileged? And also, if I can welcome Sue Bray to the call. Sue, who's the exec member for Children's Services, mentioned when she took up that position that if she could, she would try and join our meetings over the next period of time. So welcome, Prue. Hopefully you'll I'll say enjoy. You'll welcome the session today.
Thank you.
Luciana, we have in our list of school representatives, we have 2 gaps, one for a secondary school representative and 2 for primary school representatives. Do we have any colleagues who are stepping into those vacant positions?
I have approached the people that coordinate the primary federation and the secondary federation meetings, and I've asked them to go back to their groups and get nominations.
Thank you. So if we could pass that message on through Brian and other colleagues, and Amanda would be here, but also through both the secondary group and the primary group. We've got 3 seats on School Forum that are currently vacant. It would be good to have those filled, if we could please, by the meeting in December.
Yeah, we do have interest. We just need it to be formally appointed.
Excellent. Thank you. I've had comments from a couple of people who have other meetings that start very shortly after 12, and therefore we would like to go for a hard stop at 12. So I would try and do my best to manage our business through the morning so that we finish by 12 o'clock. Forgive me, therefore, if during part of a presentation I try and ease you forward so that we can move on to the rest of the agenda. With that introduction, can I ask if anybody has any apologies that they are bringing to the meeting? Luciana, have you been advised of any apologies?
Yeah, I think it's already been said. Amanda Woodfin has sent her apologies and sent a substitute. Paul Gibson is not able to attend. And Phil Sherwood, who is looking to join us, hopefully in the future, he's looking for an appointment. He sends his apologies today.
Thank you. Has anybody else brought any apologies from other colleagues that they may have heard? I can't see any hands going up or any comments. So thank you for thank you for those apologies, Luciana. Could we therefore move to item 4, which is the minutes? First point on the minutes is to ask if anybody has any factual corrections that they would wish to make to those minutes. I can't see any hands going up and there are no comments. Then at the next appropriate opportunity, Luciana, I will sign those minutes as being a factually correct record of our meeting in July. Can I move on to matters arising? Helpfully, you may have noticed that at the back of the minutes of each of the meetings, we now have a section called Matters Arising. I'm turning to page 15 of the pack of documents that was sent out today. The matters arising as we run down, if I can run down them, a number of them have been addressed, a number of them have been moved forward. Could I ask if, and I think this is probably addressed to Catherine and Lynn, a group of forum members to meet with officers in early September to discuss the National Funding Formula consultation?
Hi Paul, yes, so the task and finish group on the schools forum has commenced and that's going on, and obviously we have the schools budget consultation paper later on the agenda.
Thank you. Item number 2 on matters arising was the Education Welfare Service. For a variety of reasons, including I gather, Sal, that there's a white paper out at the moment. We've discussed this and suggest it may be better to bring that to a December meeting when you've had an opportunity to integrate the thinking in the white paper with your own thinking.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. That would be very, very helpful for colleagues. We have made changes already in terms of starting to respond to white paper, but it enables us the time to bring a fuller report.
Thank you, Sal. Item 3 is falling roles, which was more a comment to the new admissions group to ask them to be innovative in their approaches to falling roles across the borough. Item 4, maternity and sickness. I think there's a comment in that, if I'm correct, Catherine, in the budget report for this month. Thank you. So we'll cover that there. Revenue monitoring, we were possibly going to try and represent that 1.7 million risk in our figures. I couldn't see that in the figures today or this week, Lynn.
So I suppose what you'll see is that there's a movement on the forecast, and that's largely because a lot of that risk has translated into reality within the forecast. So that's it's not specifically, it's become less of a noted risk and more actually built into the figures now, but there's a further risk still identified.
Okay, all right. I still would suggest that we show the fact that we've understood your presentation of the risk by way of a note somewhere. Even though we appreciate we're spending, there's a million of it gone, but nevertheless, I still believe that would be appropriate to show it as a note. Principles behind the funding of all 4 blocks presented to schools forum prior to Christmas.
Again, we've obviously, in terms of the budget update paper later, we've set out the sort of revised timescale, except we're still working on that basis that we can get at least principles. We're obviously not going to know everything on all blocks, early years in particular, in time for the December meeting, but it's still an intention to bring an update on principles of where things are for all blocks, so we can get a good discussion at December, and then sort of update anything from the settlement to consider decisions in January meeting.
Okay, thank you. Item 7, Ian, I think we were asking if you could have a chat with Kerry and Karen to ensure that they were comfortable continuing with you on the task and finish group, early years task and finish group.
Well, I think it's important. I haven't spoken to Kerry, but I think it's important that Kerry is still on it because she's obviously a maintained nursery. And Karen, yes, would love to still be part of it.
Excellent. Would you like Luciana to get in contact with Kerry to check that she's still comfortable being a member of the group?
I'll ring her this afternoon.
Thank you very much. And I had a comment about admission numbers and current roll numbers to understand if our challenges were driven by lower pupil numbers. I can't remember. Does anybody recall what that referred to? Forgive me, my memory is fading on that item. I will research it afterwards if we can move on. Has anybody else got any matters arising from the minutes of the meeting on the 6th of July? If not, thank you. I can't see any hands going up. If we can move forward, please, to item 5, declarations of interest. Does anybody have a declaration of interest that they've not previously declared and or is specific to today's agenda items? I can't see any hands going up and no comments. So therefore, I'm assuming there are no additional declarations of interest to be given today. I can move then on to agenda item 6, which is the revenue monitoring report. I think I'm probably handing over to Catherine at this stage.
Yes.
And Catherine, do you think as you go through, could you share your numbers pages so that you talk to the numbers pages from your report, please?
Apologies if you can hear stuff in the background. As I said earlier, there's people tarmacking my road, so it's very loud here. Summary. It looks like actually on here the variance column has been chopped off, but so apologies for that. Right, so schools forum are asked to note the contents of the report. As you can see, there is an in-year deficit of 5.7 million that's been projected. And as we said earlier, as Lynn said, in July, we flagged a risk of around 1.7 million because of the increase in the HCPs and the complexity of needs. 1.1 million of that has the increase. The movement shows that 1.7 million, 1.1 million of it has actually happened. It's converted to actuals, but there's still further risks remaining that we anticipate coming through because as we still reviewing the information that's coming through, and there's no evidence of the HCP activity slowing down at all. In the schools block, we had a movement of 108,000. That was mainly due to the growth fund. We're anticipating using more of the reserves that we brought forward from previous years. We're still expecting new classes to open, but as you can see from the appendix, we've changed the figures. So all the ones that are yellow are our contingency. We've changed the figures down to reflect the proportion of the year that's left of this year. So they were higher last time, so they've gone down because it can only open from now. We also have in there new school St Cecilia's. We're anticipating could open this year rather than next year, so we've brought that forward into our figures for this year. We know that this isn't, we recognise that's not an actually agreed position because the trust have raised concerns over the affordability of that amount, because the growth fund formula actually hasn't changed and kept in pace with inflation at all. So that's been the same. Put down here the figures that we've been using, and that's been the same for a number of years. I've highlighted the contingency that's left. So if the classes don't come to fruition, that's what we can carry forward into the new year, plus the 93,000. For de-delegation, as we said from the previous minutes, we said we'd look at what was being charged this year so far. And so for parental leave, we looked at the figures to date. We assumed costs going forward in the same way. We're still going to review this, obviously, as the year goes on. But at the minute, we're anticipating an underspend of that 57,000, which we can carry forward into next year. So when we set the rates for next year, we can incorporate that in. High needs block. Let me just scroll back up to that report. So again, we've lost the variance column there, but we had an increase. The 1.1 million is increasing HCPs in Wokingham mainstream schools and special schools. Obviously, we've said before there's lack of provision in Wokingham for special schools, so we're having to place children out of borough in maintained special schools out of borough or independent and non-maintained special schools. We're also happy to increase places at Addington, our own special schools, and that's been reflected in the forecast as well. And for early years, we've just put a note in there to say that we actually got more than we were anticipating for our adjustment for the previous last financial year. And we were expecting clawback. We actually got more funding in, but that's the way that the census was working last year due to like COVID. So we're discussing with the early years task finish group what we're going to do with those additional funds. So we'll be discussing that in our meetings this term. That's that. Questions?
Thank you. Can I open the session to questions? Thank you for that concise report, Catherine. Colleagues have questions for Catherine. I've got a few, but I'm sure anybody else. Okay, if I start then, Catherine, of the 1.7 that we 1.7 million risk that we identified in July or June, July, whenever it was, it looks as if 1.1 of that has come to fruition, or 1 million plus has come to fruition. Therefore, we're still thinking that there's 600,000 that may flow through. Are the latest figures that you have indicating that 600,000 is now not sufficient, or do you think the risk is going to be greater than the remaining 600,000?
Lynn's coming in there.
Do you want me to pick that up, Catherine?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think based on what we know, the activity level is still what we looked at when we came up with that 1.7 was based on the sort of assessment activity and the conversion from assessment to plan activity that we were seeing. That is, it's not slowing, but it's fairly steady. So on that basis, with the information we've got, we wouldn't revise the balance of that 1.7, Paul, but you know, we took this in time for this meeting. We're taking that in almost sort of slightly less than the half point of the year. We know that there's always a lot of settling down with the new academic year and in terms of what we think might happen and what eventually happens, particularly in, say, the post-16 age group, etc. So it's very much something that we're keeping under close watch and working really closely with the SEND team to make sure that we've got as up-to-date information as possible. So sort of getting up to that 1.7 level is still as good as we would have at this stage.
It's a good answer. Thank you, Lynn. Darren, I saw your hand up a second ago. You got a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for this, Catherine. Just on growth fund, the in-year growth funding is down as 1.589. I thought it was 1.664.
I did slightly lower things when I was just went through with peers. Just yeah, sorry, just a little bit of an adjustment in there, just from making sure that we'd had classes that start from January had the right proportion in there.
But I think the total growth wasn't it 1.664 million?
The income that we had in.
Yeah, rather than 1.589.
So the 1.589 is what we top sliced from the schools block this year.
Okay.
And then it's included in that. That's a really good question. Right, one sec. That's what we took from schools block, the 1.589.
Okay. But the actual growth funding was 1.664.
The income we got was 1.6. Yeah.
Okay. Super. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. Are there further questions to Catherine on the revenue monitoring report? If not, then thank you very much, Catherine. It's great. Could we move on, please, to the next item, which is item 7, high needs block update, which I think is Lynn. So.
Yeah, I'm happy to introduce this paper, colleagues. Hopefully you've had a chance to read through. Again, we're experiencing a really challenging position in respect of the high needs block. Our initial projections indicated a 4.4 million shortfall. However, our latest figures in terms of reporting is showing an increase in that deficit provision by 1.1 million to 5.5. Much of this, as colleagues will be aware, is driven by our continuing growth in the total number of EHCPs. Over the last year, since September 21, we've seen an EHCP rise by 19% just in year. And our SEND services are seeing significant numbers of requests to assess per month, which we're responding to, and many of those, the largest proportion of those, do result in an EHCP, providing for additional pressure onto the high needs block funding. In terms of an update, our SEND Innovation and Improvement Programme continues to deliver. Colleagues will be aware that this is the programme that we commenced a few years ago off the back of our written statement of action. Through the programme and through our SEND Improvement Board, when we were revisited, it was felt that we had progressed fully in 5 of the 6 areas in relation to our SEND improvements, but we have continued to maintain the SEND board and the innovation programme, recognising that we still have much more to deliver, and that continued activity with many of these activities are part of our kind of thinking and approach to continuing to work to try and stem the flow in terms of EHCP needs assessment, but also part of our profile around how we're seeking to cap and manage demand on the high needs block. There's a massive amount of work that's been done recently in respect of SEND sufficiency planning. Because of the increase around our SEND population, there's been a big piece of work around reviewing and revisiting and looking at our resource-based provision. We're looking to explore the development of SEND units so that we're developing that continuum of support from mainstream through resource-based into SEND units. And special schools, so we're making sure that we're getting the right place at the right time for children and young people, thinking through our transitions arrangements. And colleagues will also be aware that we have submitted, or are in the process of submitting, applications for 2 new special schools within the borough, again to assist us in managing our need for local provision, which will also have an impact on the high needs block going forward. It continues to be a really challenging arena. The financial outlook is really complex in terms of the number of things that are going on at the moment, and my next presentation paper into safety valve will hopefully give you a sense of some of that complexity. But we are in conversation with the Education Skills Funding Agency around looking at our local position, working through our deficit management plan proposals in order to enable us to start towards a healthier or more balanced position in respect of our high needs block challenge. So I'll conscious of time, Chair, so I'll stop there in terms of presentation, but happy to take questions.
Thanks, Sal. And recognising you're laying a platform for the next item on the agenda, which is the safety valve discussion, can we concentrate on the update to the high needs block as presented in item 7? Do we have questions for Sal, then Catherine, etc.? I've got a couple, please, if I may. The chart on page 32 again seems to have suffered a little by the PDFing of the document. Do you know what what? Sorry, the figure 4 total EHCPs says 165. There's a digit missing, I'm presuming, after that.
There is a digit missing. Bear with me 2 seconds. So it should say 1651.
Thank you.
And there should also be a column for August 22, which shows a number of 1672. My apologies that that's not come through on the paper.
With and this probably goes to you and to Lynn, in the 1.7 million, which assumed that we recognise the challenges in the growth of EHCPs across the borough. What was the number that we assumed we would have by March 23 that drove the 1.7 million, and how does that relate to 1672 at August 22?
So the 1.7 was based on the same activity that's quoted there. It was effectively that assumption of an additional 30 EHCPs per month. So it is effectively almost sort of tracking that same projection through of an additional 30 each month.
September, October, November, December, January, February, March. So 720. So you're assuming your 1.7 would have assumed 1,800, almost 1,900 EHCPs by March 23.
So yeah, just
plus or minus,
sort of between the 1,800, somewhere around that because by our projections in terms of where we thought we might be for SEN 2 status come January is just over the 1,800, and then continuing to grow over the rest of the course of the financial year. Obviously, the financial impact in year becomes less as we, with only a few months left for the end of the year. But it is based on that trajectory.
Okay, thank you. Other colleagues have questions to Sal on the update. Looking down my list. We've not had our coffees so far this morning. Get up lightly, Sal. Do you want to just briefly touch on the very nice diagram on the last page 36, which I thought was an interesting addition to the document?
Yeah, so 36 describes or shows, as I was saying, what we want to try and develop in terms of a broader continuum of support. At the moment, our provision within the borough is that we have obviously our mainstream school settings. We have a number of resource bases and we have special schools. And what this tries to illustrate is that placing into that continuum SEND units And those two middle blocks are in essence looking at the nature of need that children may have, and therefore their ability to be supported within mainstream environments with the additional support of either a resource base or a SEND unit. So what we do find is we have lots of, or some children, young people, that actually go into special school settings, not because they cannot or could not be supported appropriately within a mainstream setting with the right level of support arrangement round them, which currently isn't there in our system. So part of our review of resource bases has started to address that and think about, actually, is there another step in our provision where actually children's needs can't be met within resource base, but may not need the level of intervention and support that a special school provides? And therefore, is there another element which is almost like an enhanced resource base approach in order to, again, manage some of our demand and manage some of our cost, and importantly, make sure that children are educated in a way that best meets their needs?
And do you know yet what an enhanced resource base might look like, or is it sort of is it still something that's evolving in the thinking?
Yeah, we're finalising some of the detail around that, and that's partly why Kerry's joined the meeting in terms of today as an observer. However, one of the principal elements is around the dedicated time that a child either spends within the mainstream setting as opposed to the resource base or the SEND unit. So within a resource base, the expectation will be that children can spend about 50% of their time in the mainstream setting, but will need about 50% of their time within a resource base set up specifically to support their needs. In a SEND unit, that balance of time shifts. So they are spending less time within the mainstream classes, but more time having that specialist support provided for them. So it's very much around the nature of the support that's wrapped around children whilst they're in mainstream schools.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions to Sal on the update? I can't see hands going up or anybody commenting. Then Sal, I think that's led you very nicely into item 8, the important piece around the work that you and the team have put into on the safety valve.
Thank you, Chair. I've just realised, to my shame, that I didn't actually share the document. Let me share this one on screen now. My apologies, colleagues. Hopefully you've got them all in front of you to look at anyway. But in terms of the update then, in terms of safety valve programme, again, hopefully colleagues have had the opportunity to read through the paper. What I would a level of caution on is around some of the trend data and cumulative figures that are reported in this report, because it's a work in progress, and these were some assumptions that were made at the time at which this report was drafted. However, we're continuing to move on, validate and revisit all of those figures. But I would just like to start with that short caveat. In essence, though, what Safety Valve is, it's a programme that's been delivered through the Department for Education and Education Skills Funding Agency to support those local authorities that have a high level of DSG deficit. And so we've been invited to join the Safety Valve programme. And what the programme seeks to look at is, in terms of where are we at as a local authority now? Where do we think we're going in terms of our growth and our demand? how is that impacting on the DSG? Because we know that our overspend in DSG is predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly high needs block. And therefore, what are the areas of work or the areas of activity we can do within Wokingham in order to change that curve, in order to not only make sure that we are managing appropriately the demand for EHCPs and EHCP assessment, but therefore partly the knock-on effect of that in terms of costs incurred against the high needs block, but also how are we configuring our services more effectively in order to also make sure that we're having that impact on the high needs block as part of the DSG. So we have, again, like I say, I'm not going to focus too much on those numbers at this stage because we're continuing to validate them. But in essence, what we are putting forward is a large and ambitious programme of work streams that includes long-term, medium-term and short-term areas of work that will impact on the system in a way that will continue to support good outcomes for children, right place, right time, but be costed against a deficit reduction model in terms of our management plan. In here, I've identified the 24 key work streams, some of which colleagues will recognise as already areas that are ongoing, but we seek to develop further. And colleagues will have also noted from reading the paper that there are new work streams and new elements also within this paper. Again, I'm not proposing to go through each one of those individually now, as I hope that colleagues have had a chance to look through them, and I'll happily answer some questions at the end. So we are engaging with a range of our partnership bodies and forums around the safety valve programme, because whilst the DSG is managed through the local authority, actually the implementation and the impact of this really challenging programme of work will be felt across the partnership, and therefore it's really important that we have partnership understanding and engagement around this whole programme. We'll be able to share and start to engage in much of that co-production going forward following our initial full engagement meeting with the Safety Valve Programme team from the ESFA, which is later on actually this afternoon. So there are a number of things beyond this afternoon in terms of ongoing negotiation around those initial proposals that will happen with the ESFA, but we will also be working with our partners in co-producing the detail of how those will be delivered and the impact that we're likely to see across the system. I think it's really important to note that over the past 2 to 3 years, our focus has been around improving outcomes for children following the written statement of action. And again, you know, that having had the full engagement of our partners throughout that process, schools, settings, our health colleagues and others, has really helped us to change some of those outcomes for young people and deliver the improvement that we needed as a system. This is now the next step about how do we continue to ensure we've got that quality system for children and young people, whilst addressing our deficit position and creating a longer term sustainable position for our DSG budgets. So again, very conscious of time, so I just wanted to briefly run through the paper for colleagues, because hopefully colleagues have read them, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks. Actually, you could keep that back on the screen again. Could you just roll back up to your, because I thought the strategic priorities were the, we went through those quite quickly. I thought they were key.
So if I may, the strategic priorities, we are aligning with the strategic priorities as identified within our SEND strategy and the work of the SEND IIP, so the improvement partnership. But one of the things that we're likely to have to do as we move through the safety valve plan is start to move to a position where we're moving away from the premise around written statement of action, but building on the good work of that SEND partnership and develop that SEND partnership into delivery against safety valve work streams and the contribution both in co-production but also in terms of monitoring and challenge around delivery around those. So we will see a bit of a shift and a development, but not a complete replacement of our SEND IIB to take account of safety valve over the next 5-year period. So what we've tried to do is align with what's already been happening that's delivered us improvement in order that we can use that as a strong platform for moving forward in terms of the safety valve.
And how do you take those work streams, develop them into action plans? What's your thinking and support that you might need for that?
So currently within the SEND IIB, there are a number of working groups. So there are working groups under each of the strategic priorities. We are aligning the 24 safety valve work streams with those priorities, and therefore we'll be engaging with those working groups around how this work will align with, build on and add value to the work that they've already been doing under those strategic priorities. And that's been the development working arrangement over the last 2.5 to 3 years through the SEND board that's delivered us the change and the outcomes against the written statement of action. And because it's worked so well and because we've had that partnership engagement and that co-production, it's something that we want to build on in terms of the safety valve. So we'll be looking to use very, very similar mechanisms around partnership engagement.
Do you need support from School Forum in terms of, I'll call it volunteers, or are you comfortable that the approach that you're taking, you're identifying colleagues to join you and support the work streams?
I think obviously as the safety valve programme itself is inextricably linked to DSG reduction and therefore ongoing budget management decisions, it's imperative that Schools Forum is engaged and kept informed and provides us, again, support and challenge through the process. I would like to suggest that we keep the safety valve programme as a regular agenda item to Schools Forum, so that Schools Forum is abreast of the activity that's happening and the impact that we're seeking on the DSG as a result of it. So with your permission, Chair, I'd like to add that in as one of the recommendations that we would look to regularly report on and take comment on our safety valve activity going forward.
I think that would be most welcome, Sal. Most welcome indeed. Can I open the session for other comments from colleagues? You're not going to leave me to ask the only questions again.
Are there any other colleagues in the meeting today? Again, Chair, I'm more than happy again to this will be an ongoing piece of work. It is developing as we go forward, and I'm more than happy to take comments or try and respond to questions from colleagues outside of the meeting as well, if that's helpful as things develop.
Thank you. Prue, you've got a question, and then Brian. I'm going to come to Brian. So, Prue?
It's not a question, it's more a statement to say, clearly, safety valve is very important. I mean, we want engagement with all our partners on it, but it's not a separate thing. It's a driver and a mechanism to help us to do the things that we already knew we needed to do and which we've already embarked on. So we know, and we've been on a journey of improving our SEND provision. We're still on that journey. We need to look at the money. Whatever engagement we can have with any schools, everybody is welcome to contact me if we want more informal discussions. I'm quite happy to have those because Schools Forum doesn't meet that often. We're keeping the Borough Education Partnership informed. We need your help to deliver this, because it's your money as well as ours. It's not something we can do in isolation. But we thank you for all your support so far with all the changes that we've had over the last few years. I'm not going to say we're looking forward to the journey, but we know we're girding our loins, and officers have worked extremely hard to get ready for this afternoon's meeting. So I'd like to thank them, but I'd like to thank all of you for your support so far, and hopefully we can fix this together and make a better SEND system for everybody, which is our intention. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Brian, you've got a question, and then I've got Helen.
I haven't got so much a question, it's more backing up what you were saying earlier, Paul, about updating School Forum. I know, Sal, you've come to the Borough Education Partnership and also the leadership drop-in, so a lot of the heads have already heard this message, so I think we'll get a better understanding of it. But could you include it on the agenda for the leadership drop-in each month that we have, so we've got an update about what's going on? So it means it's more engagement with more of the head teachers and the partners across there.
Absolutely, Brian. I'll discuss with Gillian, and I think it might be worthwhile thinking around the right reporting cycle. So whether it's monthly or whether it's every other month.
Yeah.
Because I think it depends on the following today's meeting. We're then going into some intense discussions and negotiations with the SFA, which eventually will deliver for us a set of targets and agreements that we will be making with the ESFA, and therefore from that I think it'll be really helpful, not only that we're keeping Schools Forum engaged, but yes, the leadership drop-in engaged in how are we doing against those targets and agreements. But absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Helen?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry, my voice isn't very strong today. I just wanted to fully endorse everything that Prue and Sal have said. This is about how we all collectively pull together and work this through as a system. There has been a huge amount of work over the summer period and before that, as has been outlined. And very helpful to have the suggestion from Brian there also about how we can engage with the whole system around the improvements that we want to make for all of our children. So as Prue has said, she's open to conversations. Likewise, Sal and myself are outside of this meeting. If we need to have an extraordinary meeting at any point, we would be happy to do so, obviously within the ramifications of the constitution that we have around this. But I think it's a collective call for action from us all to work together and to do some very challenging things over the next period of months and years. So thank you all for the support that I know you will bring to this. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Carol?
Sorry, I'm just looking at this, and sorry, I'm a numbers person, and I see that you're looking to balance the budget by 27-28, which seems a massive ambition. When do you think Schools Forum will be able to look at some actual numbers? How far ahead do you think that is?
Lynn can jump in as well, but I would suggest that the key critical element is our ongoing discussions with the SFA over certainly this afternoon and then over the next few weeks in order to agree our position, agree our approach. Normally the negotiations, as I understand it from other local authorities that have been through it, take between 2 to 3 months until you have that formal agreement on what your actual plan and therefore the correlating position will be. I'm hoping that we will be in position earlier and sooner than that in order to be able to state exactly what our position will be. As I said, the figures that are in this particular paper were based on a set of assumptions that we were making some weeks ago. Things are moving forward at a pace as we continue to validate the data, as we continue to update our assumptions and our modelling, and therefore those numbers are likely to change significantly over the next few weeks. So I wouldn't put too much stake in the ones that are in this paper. They were point in time. But as we model up, of course, we will bring that back to Schools Forum to share with you the detail of our final position as agreed and presented to ESFA.
Thanks, Carol. Other questions from colleagues? Sarah.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I endorse the safety valve work completely, but I do think I need to raise the point that there is an actual crisis currently, and a lot of the safety valve work is about what we're going to do going forward. But currently, capacity and financially, there's a huge burden on the one special school in Wokingham, which is Addington. So there are no places now available at all for pupils going forwards. The last panel was 50 pupils and we couldn't offer any places. So I just need to put a caveat. I totally understand the safety valve work, but I also think colleagues need to understand the crisis now and the financial burden and the capacity burden that's on Addington School with having to come up with solutions for placing children in a building that now is at full capacity. And I know that a lot of that is not in the safety valve programme, the actual detail of that, and I'm not going to go into it. But I just want to noted that there is a crisis now, and we have no places for our children with SEN in Wokingham going forward.
Yes, absolutely recognise that point, Sarah, and it's a real challenge. And I know you and I and other colleagues have continued to talk and discuss and explore what might be options going forward, and we'll continue to do that. But you're absolutely right to flag that is a key current risk for us in the authority or in the borough in terms of the availability of places locally now, as well as going forward. We know that we've put in for the 2 new schools, but they are not, even if we are successful, they are not likely to come through until towards the end of that 5-year period. So we have the current challenge that you're talking of now, Sarah, is a challenge that will continue into the next 3 to 4 years. And therefore we've got to be thinking through as a whole system what else we can do, hence why thinking about the send unit approach as part of, not an entire, but as part of a mitigation against some of that challenge, but also think creatively about what else we can be delivering as well. But you're right to raise it, Sarah.
And financially for Addington School as well, obviously the capacity to manage these projects and the leadership capacity. But also I think it is a plea to mainstream colleagues if there is any possibility of satellite classes. I know that's not in the safety valve at the moment, but a satellite classes that Addington can support you to run for you, but in your schools to cover the period of when these projects are going to get going would also be gratefully received. Any mainstream schools that have space that we can run satellite classes. I think I don't usually have a forum where there's lots of mainstream people there, so that's something that I'm just saying that I'd like to go out there.
Thank you, Sarah. Shirley?
I think it's just to go along with what Sarah is saying and actually point it out. I mean, Sal already knows, he won't be surprised that I've put my hand up to say that I absolutely agree that the crisis is now, and I think it is a crisis, and I don't use that word lightly. Because we are all, looking at these students who are coming into the borough, and we are then putting applications for EHCP, where they've come in with the equivalent from another country, etc. They are potentially I'd be surprised if they don't get their EHCP, and then looking at where we're going to place them next. And I think that is the big issue that we're all facing now. So whilst this sounds fantastic for 3 to 4 years time, going along, and I think Sarah is at breaking point in terms of what the capacity she has. There's no more capacity. And I think we need to look at, as this group as well as others, what we're going to do in that interim. So, you know, obviously, Sarah's just suggested satellite classes, but it's actually the bigger picture. Where is the planning for that going now for the next 3 to 4 years, or next year, or the next 6 months? So that would be my question, is what are we doing now? Because we talk about the future, but not now.
Thank you, Shirley. Sal, do you want to, or Lynn, perhaps come back on that? Both colleagues have raised the issue that, yes, understand where you're going with a longer term plan, but between now and 2027, we've got 3 or 4 years to go. The funding for the activity in Wokingham is, by the sound of it, going to have to. How does that fit in your plan?
Again, I think at this point is really, it is a really challenging position that we find ourselves in, and I think we need to be looking at a range of approaches, but we also have to balance that out against the availability of resources for us to be able to deliver, either through the high needs block or potential implications for increased capital spend. So if we are looking at additional satellite provision, it's how do we ensure that that satellite provision is set up in a way that can also meet the needs of this cohort of learners. Absolutely, it's a conversation that we need to be having now with a range of colleagues. I'm happy to go away with Lynn, with Sarah, and with others around setting up a forum where we can start to have that really detailed dialogue and start to consider as a system what are our solutions. It's something that, picking up on what Prue was saying earlier, it's not something that as a local authority we have a solution on our own. It has to be delivered as a system-wide approach.
I hear that, but I'm looking at and I appreciate you're saying the numbers need to change. Your deficit, your cumulative deficit with no mitigations.
Scary.
The numbers are just wrong. Not scary. Your deficit this year is going to be 8 million quid plus or minus a penny or two. You're not going to have a deficit of 41 million quid in 26-27. So there's some challenges with those numbers. That aside, if you're assuming those levels, clearly for the activity in the next couple of years, we are going to have to put a budget in place, and that budget is going to have to make some assumptions. Are those assumptions built into the safety valve program, or is there a separate stream running alongside safety valve that says this is how we're going to handle the activity for the next couple of real years?
No, we don't have multiple streams of activity per se. Oh, I see Lynn wants to come in. Lynn, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say that there's a significant amount of detailed modelling that underpins everything that we're looking at. And I suppose as Prue mentioned earlier, it's not seeing safety valve as something separate. It's about the work that we need to do in terms of sensible longer term financial planning as a local authority around the SEND system and high needs block full stop. So we have the assumptions that we're modelling around, as Sal had in the paper, around that sort of unmitigated projection, and that reflects the real challenge that we've got just now, that actually we will have an increasing number of children and young people with need for specialist placements, but we don't have any additional in borough in that unmitigated world, and therefore the unit cost of where we would need to educate them starts to increase. As part of the management action plan that sits alongside that then works through all the different actions that we can identify, whether that's new provision or the other work streams that's been referred to in the plan, about how that changes either the unit cost, because the setting the setting is in borough as opposed to independent non-maintained, for example, or about managing that overall number of EHCPs, what allows us to arrive at a mitigated position. In terms of taking that longer term model, and that's something we'll take the high needs block task and finish group through now that we're at that point in terms of the work that's going to be upcoming over the coming weeks and months. It will be about reflecting on that individual year model over the next 5 years, but translating that into the decisions we'll need to make about budget setting for next year in particular. And what we're looking to do, and part of the reason why it then becomes very complex is, you know, so as Sarah's very well articulated, all the ongoing discussions around the work at Addington and other areas about how we continue to keep reflecting that into the model. But just to assure you that it's not running as a separate stream, it's all very much built off a core set of modelling that's informed by our experience and all the work we've done to date in terms of understanding our baseline and trying to improve reporting, but using non-finance colleagues as far as we possibly can, and that will include, you know, input from all of you and the high needs block task and finish group in particular, about how we ensure the non-financial assumptions that we turn into financial impacts into that model are really clear, transparent and understood by everyone. But that crisis that's been referred to is absolutely how that plays out in reaching that unmitigated position by year 5, because that's the trajectory that we would be on if nothing else happened. A bit of a lengthy answer, Paul. I don't know whether that.
I'm sure that there was a wisdom and flow to how it got there. I didn't hear in there how you're going to cope with a capacity problem in 23-24. What I heard in there was we'll model it, we'll plan it, it'll fit in with our overall. So it isn't separate. I thought, great, I understand that, but as of the 1st of April 23, we've not got a program for a delivery program.
So I can only comment on the financial modelling. I can't comment on the capacity actions. I'll leave that.
Who would like to comment on the capacity?
And again, as I suggested, that's partly linked into safety valve currently in terms of some of our working assumptions. But actually, as Sarah and other colleagues have opened up, I think we can go further in terms of some of the discussions that we need to spark around satellite provision, an additional provision that we can create speedily. But as of today, I don't have a detailed plan that I can share with colleagues around that, because it will take that engagement of colleagues around those types of approaches.
Thank you, Sal. Shirley and then Prue.
I'm just going to go back to the point. So within that, Lynn, within that detailed modelling that you've done, if we know these children are there and they're coming, has that been modelled into it to actually pay for them going out of borough? Because actually we know these children are there. We've talked about these year after year. So we know them going out of borough is more expensive. So has that been modelled in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Has been modelled in. So if we do something internally, then that would potentially, if it's funded correctly, it would potentially mitigate some of what's going out, which is always more. So to me, I don't understand why we're still sat here we've modelled in for them to leave borough, which I've been here, this is my 6th year now. We've been saying for 6 years, that's really expensive. We've modelled that in, but 6 years on, we're still in a position where actually these numbers are growing. We've seen time and time again, the numbers of SEND children is going up, and the need for and the parents want them. So it's not the number of SEND children are going up and the parents want them to stay in mainstream. The number of EHCPs is going up and the parents want them to go to a specialist provision. So whilst, yes, we have to provide some capacity in our mainstream schools and we continue to do that, the parent choice is they want them to go, which is actually why that we're paying for out of borough. So within that modelling, if the number that are going out that we're talking about in year 5, year 6 and present coming into the borough, if that money was taken out and put towards satellite and supporting Sarah and some of the other things that have been talked about in the next, to mitigate this risk that we currently have in the next few years, is that something that can be looked at quite urgently and before April? Because the need is now, not in April, not in 25, 26, 27. So the money is there. It's just been delegated currently to go out of borough. Am I right, or have I got that completely wrong?
Yeah, so the absolute modelling does, what you've described, Shirley, is exactly what the modelling does. What I would say is I'll leave Sal to comment on what are the other capacity options we can look at, but when those are identified, then absolutely me and my team would support the financial modelling to build that in. And the work that's going on behind the scenes, and as we is exactly that. It's that unmitigated what it would look like over each of the next 5 to 10 years if we didn't have additional provision or we didn't do something different, and then what's the impact of the range of activity that we're identifying through the management plan that we can deliver. As more and more of those are identified through the service and wider discussions, then absolutely we are working really closely together to ensure that we can financially model those, understand those in the financial model, and then build that in.
So the financial modelling is there, and the finances is there for the kids, this massive influx we're getting, but it's just going out of borough at the moment.
So all the financial modelling, yeah, is absolutely, it's based on the projections of the total number of EHCPs that we expect to have over each of the next years. And then the financial modelling looks against that and says, well, given that we're at capacity, so it breaks down that overall number of EHCPs into each of the setting types. It looks at average costs over different band and weighted differently within each of those setting types. And it looks at the projection each year, calculates and works that through. And it's sort of, if you think about those that would have a need for a special school placement, it reflects on that unmitigated projection that we are at capacity. As Sarah's described, we're at capacity within the borough. Therefore, for every additional specialist pupil and that unmitigated projection, for every additional pupil an EHCP that comes in that has a need for a specialist school, effectively, if we do nothing, the cost associated with those pupils will be on those average independent non-maintained levels rather than the cost of keeping them in borough. So that's how you get to that really, really large unmitigated projection. And then, as I said, what we've got is the series of work, the costed and the benefits associated with all the actions that are being identified through the management plan about how we start to drive that projection back down as quickly as possible. Because clearly, although we're saying that, yeah, you're absolutely right, those costs are going out, but those costs are over and above the financial envelope that the DFE have given us. So it's about trying to balance that challenging situation as at early a stage as we can from a pounds and pence viewpoint, but also to make sure that we've got vulnerable children and young people in the right type of setting.
Thank you, Lynn. I want to come back to Prue, but I think, forgive me, I don't think we're necessarily questioning the veracity of how the numbers got together. If our assumptions are there's going to be a shed load of money going out of the borough to pay for, why not spend that shed load of money on doing something inside the borough quick? I won't say down and dirty because that sounds awful, but doing something very quick that is likely to cost less than the shed load of money. Prue, sorry, go on.
Do you want Sal to come back first?
Fine. I was going to say, absolutely, Paul. In principle, that's entirely what we want to do. I think what we need to be looking at is we've done some work around resource bases, send units, potential expansion. We look at of Addington. How do we create the additional or some additional places that we need? And as I said earlier, we have been having some of those conversations with Addington at the moment. Clearly, it's not going to be enough to meet the full challenge that we have in the borough, but we have been exploring how much further or what else can we be looking at as well in terms of other assets that might be available to us quickly in order to amend, refurb, update in order to meet this type of need, as well as the conversation around can our existing schools, estate and colleagues also provide support in this instance. One of the other things that we just ought to recognise as well, and again, it will be a building picture, is that we do have Oak Tree as a special school opening in September 23, which will start to assist with some of that demand burden as well and reduce again some of our current position of having to use independent non-maintained out of borough. So there are a number of strands going, but I do recognise absolutely that there is still a long way for us to go in order to manage some of the immediate challenges that our system is facing. Sorry, Prue.
No. So Sal has actually said one of the things I want to say, which was to draw people's attention to the fact that Oak Tree is opening in September. We might have wished it had opened last September, but it was not to be. So that will help. But it is important. We looked at that diagram in Sal's previous presentation about the resource bases and the send units. That's part of the thinking behind how we do it, but we do need people to assist us with this. So Sarah's put out a plea for satellite casting, and any ideas that you've got about how we could quickly put provision in place. We are examining all the buildings and the facilities that we've got and all the methods that we might be able to do things with, but we can't do it on our own. The same message that I had before, that schools need to assist us with this if they possibly can. I think it's in all our interests, because I know that schools in Wokingham want to do the best by every child, and they recognise that having people, particularly the large influx of children that we've had coming from abroad who need to be reassessed, but they've got the equivalent of an HCP, leaving those children in limbo without proper support and all the things they need for quite a long period of time while we get them reassessed and things, that's not ideal for them either. That reduces costs further up the system, because they're likely to need more support than they would have needed to have levered in things earlier. So we're looking at all those things. I know Dan Robinson had a report, I think it went to the Borough Education Partnership or something last week, about vulnerable children and how we support vulnerable learners and what we can do to help that process. So all of those things are in the mix. It may take a few weeks for some of them to pop out into the external world because of all the complexities of how we do it. But if anybody's got any ideas, send them in. If they want, we will happily listen to them. We've got some ideas, and we may well approach people and say, can you help us with this as well? So it's not like there's nothing happening. It's just not visible, I think, at the moment yet.
Thank you, Prue. Karina?
Thanks, Paul. Can I just ask, the Oak Tree School, is that going to open for all year groups? Forgive me if I'm been ignorant and I don't know the answer to that.
We're still negotiating with Maiden Early Trust around the intake. I don't think that it is going to open up for all year groups straight away, but we'll be looking and working with them to enable access to all year groups as quickly and as swiftly as is possible.
And what would prevent that, Sal? Because forgive me, but if, it could take 7 years then, and that's an awful long time to enable our children to be placed.
Yeah, like I say, Karina, we're currently in continued conversations with, the provider around how they can gear up in readiness to enable a quick full establishment offer for us through the school.
And when might we know those answers to those questions, Sal?
I haven't got a time frame for you yet, Karina, I'm afraid.
I mean, I understand that's difficult. And my next question is about the resource bases, because we've been talking about funding for the resource bases for a long time. And again, I've got resource base at my school. It's really successful, and I'm happy to keep running it. Like Prue says, it takes all of us to be part of this. But I'm not giving any indication at all about when I'm going to get adequate funding to fund it. And yet that's a really simple decision, because we know how much it costs to run it. And unless we can run it, then those children will all be going out of borough very soon. And I just think some of these decisions, we don't seem to be getting any answers to any of these and I know sometimes it's difficult, but sometimes it's actually not that difficult.
Point taken, Karina.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Karina. Sarah, and then I'm going to try and pull it together if we can, please, Sarah.
Just to add to Karina, it's about the designation of that new school, Sal. Have we got a clear description of the designation and the type of pupils it's going to take? Because that's also key information that seems to be missing at the moment.
Yeah, so it's children with ASD that can access with support mainstream curriculum that cannot access through mainstream setting.
Okay, so not learning difficulty then, because I think that's key, obviously, because it's not going to help the capacity of those children that have got a learning difficulty in the borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any other comments, or shall we try and pull this little section together? I can't see any other hands going up. So first of all, Sal, thank you very much, Lynn, and your other colleagues who pulled this together. I don't think there is any underestimation how important this system-wide cohesive programme is that sets a vision. It might be a long way away at the moment still, but if you don't have that, you're never going to get there. So I really get that. I do think we've got to take the red flag, or the warning signs from the Sarahs and the Karinas and Shirleys, etc., where we need to be a little grateful, or we need to be thinking about the perfect not necessarily damaging the good. If there's a shed load of money in that plan, don't try and be perfect about it. Use some of that money to get over the hump whilst you're going on to that longer picture. If in terms of this particular report, some of you may not be aware, Sal and I had a bit of an argument about this. My belief is that School Forum has a responsibility to deliver or financially deliver the program once the wider system has been involved in defining it and co-producing it. Unfortunately, the way the meetings work, School Forum meeting is today. The next time the Wokingham Education Partnership meets is not for another few days, weeks, and then the heads, primary and secondary. Ideally, the Education Partnership would have met and looked at this. The primary heads would have had an opportunity to feed in. The secondary heads an opportunity to feed in. Other key stakeholders would have had an opportunity to feed in. And then it bubbles down to School Forum, where we go, now we get it. And we can see what the numbers are for the plan. But clearly that timing hasn't worked. So our objective, I think, today is to listen to what's happened, to welcome the fact that there is this sort of plan going forward, to add our encouragement to Sal and the team to go and work with ESFA and others to come back with a cohesive program. And then when you've had an opportunity to engage the wider stakeholder group, effectively endorse that program, put it into the numbers and plug that through as a budget for the next year and future years beyond that.
Absolutely, Paul. Agreed with that position, and I think the recommendations in the paper kind of reflect that agreement that we finally got to, Paul, which is helpful. As I said earlier, I might, with your indulgence, just add one further bullet point to those recommendations in terms of regular reporting back into Schools Forum.
I'd be very happy to add that as an extra. So on every School Forum, there will, certainly for the next years or two, there will be a standing item, which is effectively safety valve or whatever right terminology you want to come up with for that. Okay.
Thank you.
Can I ask if there are any colleagues who feel there's extra to be added to that, or are you comfortable with that summary being presented in the minutes as our discussion and the outcome of our discussion? I haven't seen any hands go up. Then, Luciana, if you could reflect that sort of summary in the minutes, I'd be very grateful. Sal, team, thank you very much indeed. Prue and Helen, thank you as well. If we can move then from the item 8, which was the DSG safety valve, onto item 9, which is budget planning. I'm handing over to Catherine. Yeah, hi, Catherine.
So we received our provisional allocation in July, and as you can see, we've got a slight increase for our schools block and high needs block and central services block. We obviously won't know the final allocation until December, after the October census data has been put into the tool. And this year, next year, 23-24, is going to be the first year of transitioning towards the direct national funding formula. So we now have to use all of the NFF formula factors, which is just one additional one for Woking. We've used all the others, and we need to be within 10% of the NFF rates. So we did some modelling over the summer, and we modelled the minimum allowable rates that we could use, the NFF rates, and the maximum allowable rates. And this was actually the first year that we found that using the census data from the current year meant that none of our models were actually affordable. Once we'd set aside funding for the growth fund, we couldn't actually make any of the models work. So we met the task and finish group, and we requested current pupil numbers from schools so that we could forecast more accurately what our income would be for next year, and what our likely income would be in total for the schools block. So thank you to all the schools that you all sent your data back really promptly, so that was brilliant, so we could carry on modelling. We saw that there was approximately around 600 extra pupils in the system. Using the updated pupil numbers, we found that we could afford the minimum allowable rates model and the NFF rates. Darren, I don't know if you want to come in at all about the modelling at all, but it's all going to be form part of the consultation. Yeah. So we're going to be using the modelling that we did to put into the consultation that we get out to school shortly. Part of the challenge we had that we mentioned in the revenue monitoring was growth. There's a challenge between ensuring the affordability for our individual schools and also the affordability in the system. So using the new pupil numbers, we think that we're going to get a growth fund income of about 1.5 million, and Darren said earlier it's 1.6 for this year, but we're anticipating requiring more than that because of our pupil growth and the need for new classes. So we're currently reviewing the growth fund, and again it will form part of the consultation that will be issued to schools shortly, that's the next agenda item. I don't know if anyone's got any comments on the schools block at all.
Darren, do you want to share with us some of your... Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again to Catherine, who did work through the summer on the numbers. So task and finish have met a couple of times, and as Catherine said, she modelled for us those different rates. The difference between, I think, 10% below NFF and NFF was quite small, but it was significant enough to say that we should go with the 10% below NFF at the moment. And fundamentally, our PUFs and SUFs are just too low, and it doesn't seem right that we're being asked to model against national funding formula rates, whereas the actual funding that comes in doesn't match that. So for our DFE colleagues, if they're still with us, if they could take that back, I think that would be appreciated. In terms of growth funding, as Catherine said earlier, there's a lot of contingency that's been carried forward into this year, and the modelling for this year looks fine. There is still a lot of contingency. I think it was 200,000 that's still in there for this year. There is a significant amount of contingency in place for 23-24. When I was looking at some numbers, it's not far off 700,000. So there's an awful lot of contingency there. But as we've heard, we need those places, and we heard it at the briefing yesterday for head teachers that there are very few places available in years 5, 6, and then in secondary. So that contingency is there and may well be needed. But I think it's great that what Catherine's done there with the growth fund is she's put it as a live now, rather than saying the growth fund's going to be there for the whole of the year. Because it's now October, she's moved those figures to January. So thank you very much for that. So we've got a better idea about growth, but I think there's a little bit more work that we could do on that when we know which schools are able to, if any are, to offer some more classes for current year groups.
Thank you, Darren. So if I can just get my head around the numbers, we came into this year with £400,000 roughly in our growth fund reserve. Our prediction for the spend for the year is that we would deplete that down to mid-tens of that, 50, 60,000. So we would have used over 300,000 of it, albeit that includes 200,000 of further reserve. So potentially we could be looking at the end of the year, worst case scenario, 50, 60 grand reserve, best case scenario, if that is the right term, somewhere in the 150, 160, possibly even up to 200 reserve. And then you're looking at next year.
I think it's quite a lot higher than that.
Okay.
One of the factors is, as we said earlier, that there was sort of 74,000 that went into growth for this year that wasn't top sliced off. So that 1663 rather than the 1.589 figure. So so growth sort of repaid. The growth fund for this year wasn't as high as it could or should have been, but that's fine. but there's the Matthews Green St Cecilia's money is in for this year as well.
Yeah.
But if that doesn't open,
happen this year,
goes into next year. So that's still that potential spend there.
Okay,
But
so
I think we should finish growth at the end of the year in upwards of, I would say, probably 250,000, 300,000. But Catherine's got the numbers, and obviously Piers is actively trying to start classes up. But it's very difficult to start a new class now, sort of mid-year. So the sort of contingency numbers for 22-23 look more like they'll move into the 23-24 budget.
Thank you. Lynn, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so we'll come on to this in a bit more when we talk about the budget consultation report around the growth fund, but just on picking up on what Darren said there in particular around St Cecilia's. So Catherine's obviously brought forward some of those figures that were profiled into assuming a September opening, brought a slight part year impact into this year. I just wanted to flag the fact that those are not agreed. So the figure that's included in that growth fund forecast within the revenue monitoring report is based on the current existing funding arrangements in terms of rates, etc. Keys Trust have raised concerns that actually that's not affordable to actually open and run the school on, and that's part of what's informing what we need to look at as options around consultation. So there is, while we've flagged that in there, I suppose there's a risk around that as well in terms of us balancing as a system, as Catherine mentioned, what's affordable for the growth fund in terms of that, because this is effectively, effectively top slicing out of the school's block. So what's affordable for the system, but also allows the growth fund formula that's then affordable for the individual schools that are being funded by that formula. And that's some of the challenge that we've got, which is why growth fund's been flagged as part of the consultation document that we need to undertake.
Okay, thank you. We'll come on to that in a second. Thank you, Lynn. Are there any further comments for Catherine and or Darren? Again, thank you, Darren, on the budget planning. Just to re-emphasise, we've got a task and finish group for the schools block. We've got a task and finish group for the high needs block. We've got a task and finish group for the early years block, or early years area. Is there any further support? This is probably more aimed at Darren. Any further support that you or Catherine feel you need on the growth fund challenge, or are you comfortable that within the schools block you can address that as part of your overall view of next year's budget?
I think there's when we had the last task and finish group, there's a few members of that group that were happy to work with Catherine and Piers and looking at the numbers for growth. So yeah, very happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. So you'll retain that, and you're happy that you've got the team, the capacity to support the review of that and ultimately come back with recommendations.
I am certainly, Catherine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good, thank you very much. Any further questions on budget planning? One little bit I might come back. I noticed a couple of words. Yeah, it's interesting. It's on Ian's area, on early years. There was a comment in the earlier part which talked about clawback of early years funding. And I'm aware from a conversation I think you guys shared with me a couple of weeks back that there are some potential challenges to the way we have been handling our early years program in terms of allocating funds, and how other authorities may have done it, and some challenges between those two, and whether we might be re-looking at how we undertake that process.
Yeah, I can pick that up also. Yeah, so Catherine touched on it briefly in terms of the revenue monitoring report, that we were obviously, as you said, we were anticipating a further small clawback for the last financial year, and we actually received a further allocation. And as you've said, custom and practice previously has had us distributing that out to early years providers, sort of equating it to a small number of pence per hour delivered. We've had some discussions, as you said, there's challenge in terms of ESFA expectations, because not other local authorities don't generally do that, and Ian will keep me right, but I know the fact that we have in Wokingham has always been seen as a real positive. Sal will be able to discuss more properly, but the idea now is that we understand the pressure that early years providers are under, but also we're trying to manage the overall financial position. So Sal might want to come in and talk a little bit more about, and we met Ian to brief him through informally about what sort of some of the early thinking were about how we try and target that rather than just a blanket small number of pence and pass out to providers.
Yeah, so part of our thinking of the approach is that there's two strands to it. Again, linking in with safety valve. A safety valve is around DSG deficit, not just high needs block deficit. And therefore, we need to be looking to everywhere where we're able to support that deficit reduction from whatever balances there are within the DSG, but at the same time we do recognise the particular pressures that some of our settings are experiencing, particularly in relation to cost of living crisis, the inflation, the cost of fuels and energy, and the current impact that might be having on settings. So one of the things that we've very briefly discussed with Ian is the development, as similar to what we did during the COVID pandemic, of an emergency kind of hardship fund that settings can bid into if they are experiencing significant financial cash flow challenges that threaten the longer term stability of those settings, in order that we are able to provide targeted support rather than as Lynn says, the kind of what has been the customer practice of just adding a few pence here and there to salary rates and then handing it out to all settings. So we're trying to take a much more targeted approach, but also we need to factor how this relates to our broader DSG challenge as well.
Ian, can I?
I'm broadly supportive of what Sal has promoted to me the other week. Obviously, for me, the biggest caveat on all of that is what is the rate going to be for the providers going forward, and we won't know that until later on this year. And what with cost of living and everything, you know, the few pence that we might have got in addition may be significant for lots of settings. So although I'm broadly supportive, there is that huge caveat of, you know, where are we going with rates next year for the providers? And as ever, early years have been a bit of a political football, and we're in the you know, trusses looking to play games with childcare. So who knows where we're going to be, but I'm broadly in agreement with what Sal's trying to do there.
Are there other comments from colleagues? I think, Ian, we need to use your expertise and your experience of the sector, along with Kerry and Karen and others, if you feel that's appropriate. I'll be honest, when I heard, I think it's a bonkers suggestion, to be honest. That's not the point. You guys are in the right place. You need to look at it as part of your task and finish group, and where you're going, and then come back to us and say, yep, we think it's a great idea, or your position on it. Is there anything, whilst you are doing that we can do to support you thinking that through? Are you comfortable that with working with Catherine and Lynn and Sal and your own colleagues, you'll be able to come up with a good position?
I think so. Obviously, I'm just a representative. I mentioned it at a leaders forum last week. I would need to go back and get general support for something like this. But I'm broadly supportive. I'm a larger setting, so it's a bit easier on me. It's the smaller settings that I worry about.
And do you have an approach where you think you will be able to gain their input and feedback?
We have regular forums for leaders, so I will be able to put it out to them.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, by the way, Kerry would like to continue on the task and finish group.
That's good news.
Okay.
Lovely, thanks. Ian, anything else you want to add, or are you comfortable that the topic's been aired? I think colleagues will understand what the position is, and that you are now going to go away and work with your group to come back to say, yeah, we like it, we don't like it, we would amend it in this way.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing though is that we won't know now until December what the pressures are going to be on our rates. So it's a long wait for us.
Okay, I think you're going to have to make a decision though before you get to the to deciding what the rate is.
But I'm sure we'll get some clues in the next month or so. So
excellent. Good.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Is there anybody else who would like to share comments or questions with Catherine and or Ian, specifically with Catherine around the planning programme? I'm not seeing any hands go up. Can I reiterate, as we do each year, thank you to all of you that participate in these task and finish groups. For those of you that are as long in the tooth with School Forum as I am, you may remember some very unpleasant meetings several years ago where, because we didn't have these task and finish groups pulling figures together, we ended up with a budget meeting in December and then in January, and they were less than cordial. So really appreciate all of the work you guys put into coming back to us with your recommendations, informed recommendations. If there's nothing further on item 9, can I move on to item 10, which is the budget consultation? Handing over to Lynn.
So Paul, this report obviously came around in terms of a separate report following various discussions that have been taking place over the last few weeks. In terms of giving everyone a little background to where we are, those that will remember our original budget setting timeline that we'd set out prior to the summer, we had been working on the assumption that we could consult with all schools on the various aspects of the DSG that we would want to consult on, that we would do that in a timely way at the start of the new academic year, so that we had results to feed into the meeting today. The reason that sequence of events is important is because if there's anything within the funding formulas that we want to submit a disapplication request into to the ESFA, the deadline to do that is mid-November, and therefore not being able to consider Schools Forum view at this meeting means that we wouldn't have that informed view to go into that disapplication process. Catherine's already touched through a number of the reports some of the challenges that we're facing. I think everyone recognises we've been working in a very challenging financial context, and budget setting for 23-24 is certainly taking us beyond anything that I've experienced before. And with that, therefore, there's a whole number of different things that is taking even longer for us to work through in the background than we might normally have. So we've touched on growth funds, for example, and I'll come back through some of this more specifically. But we've got what Catherine's saying around changes in terms of having that tighter the hard NFF factors and moving into that smaller window of opportunity. There's also some changes in the guidance around notional SEN, etc. So there are a lot more factors that we've had to do preparatory work through in order to ensure that we can have a really good informed consultation process with all schools. We recognised that we weren't going to do that. We were, by the time as a local authority, we were ready to feed that information with everybody's appropriate input to get to the point that we had a sound and transparent and informed consultation for schools. We weren't going to be able to do that in a way that was going to allow us to give schools enough time to consider it, to be able to view the document, consider it, ask questions, etc., and then respond, and close that process in time for today's meeting. And therefore, part of the discussion that's been happening over the last several weeks is about how we adapt the timescale while still giving cognizance to the governance and discussion and absolutely critical role that Schools Forum has in informing the final position the local authority takes under submitting any disapplication requests. So I'll come on and take through a little bit more detail, and then I'm going to bring some colleagues in Sal in at the appropriate time. But the recommendation, therefore, on this report is to note the budget consultation process and plan timeline as we now have. And because we are now talking about a consultation process that's going to run, and we will have the results, and we will need to take action as a local authority before the next forum meeting. The request is therefore that Schools Forum today confirm support in advance to support the majority view of schools that come out of that consultation process. Just taking down then in terms of where we are. So in the report it sets out the key factors that are really important in terms of that consultation arrangement. So the first one being the principles of the schools block funding formula. So those are, everyone who's responded to the consultation in previous years will know that there's a range of factors in there, as Catherine set out, about the new factor that we have to put in and the range that we have to work within. So there will be some of the standard questions around those areas that we would consult with all schools on. There's a disapplication request for split site funding for a roll through school. So again, those of you that are familiar, we've been doing that for a few years now in terms of submitting that request in. But again, we need to go through that consultation process to agree that schools and Schools Forum agree with the local authority submitting that disapplication request. There's the proposed 0.5% transfer from the schools block to the high needs block, and I'll bring Sal in a second in a bit more detail on that. But again, that's one of the key parts that we recognise. Again, we've looked at that for a number of years. We know that in terms of the planning and the decision making and the transparency of information about how that money would be invested and what the benefits of that would be, because of the lack of that in the past, Schools Forum have largely not supported, and schools have not supported that position. But again, it's something as a local authority position and linked to the overall management plan and safety valve that proposal remains for next year. Notional SEN methodology, again, some of that has changed in terms of the operational guidance. We have been flagging and linked to some of the ordinary available conversations, etc. We've obviously flagged for some time that methodology that we have used locally has remained fixed for some time. So it was on the plan to be reviewed as we go through the overall SEN system planning anyway. But some of the methodology has changed in terms of operational guidance for next year. So there's a requirement that we consider some of that. And then growth fund methodology. So picking up on, we've sort of flagged that in a number of reports as we go through. So as was mentioned in terms of budget planning, to have an affordability model. So based on our current understanding of the places that we are going to need as a system within Wokingham and the growth fund requirements, the only way that Catherine could find a model that worked was to move the growth fund methodology back to OPU, which is something that we had previously. What that does is almost drop the funding rates within the growth fund, which gives something that is broadly affordable within the APT and the overall model. However, what that does is very much contradicts with the feedback we're getting, and in particular in terms of, if we look at the St Cecilia's conversation about the fact that our current methodology is not believed to be affordable to deliver those new schools and what that's involved in, and therefore we're stuck in that place where there's a real inevitable pushback that our current growth fund funding formula is not sufficient because it's not kept pace with inflation. But actually the only way on current modelling assumptions we can get something to work is actually to reduce it even further. So in terms of transparency and being able to set that out and work through that as a system and together, growth fund needs to form part of that consultation as well. Like I say, the two areas where the particular timeline is important, so around the wider principles, notional SEN and growth fund, those can continue to be part of the discussions as we move through to December Schools Forum and ultimately set the budget in the new year. Points 2 and 3 there, so the disapplication request around split site funding, again, you know, that everyone's been very supportive of that in the past. I'm not expecting there to be any difficulty with that, but there is a process we need to go through. In which case, assuming that all schools and schools forum continues to support that, we will need to submit that disapplication request by the date of November. The other item that feeds into that disapplication process is the proposed 0.5% transfer from schools block to high needs block, because again, so if we were in a situation that the majority of schools and schools forum supported that 0.5% transfer being enacted for next year, then we don't have to submit a disapplication request to the ESFA. However, if all schools and schools forum don't support that request, then if the local authority position is that we will still look to do that, we would need to submit a disapplication request by November. So those points 2 and 3 are the critical points of understanding forum's view, and us knowing that as a local authority by that November date, so that there's an informed decision by the disapplication request deadline, and we're obviously aware that there's no further meeting of schools forum between now and then.
Thank you, Lynn. That's a wonderful piece of explanation of how we're going to get here. So items 1, 4 and 5, we'd obviously want to continue with the consultation, and they will inform further discussion where school forum ultimately will see the feedback and be engaged in how the implications of that feedback might influence the budget for next year. But in terms of decision taking today, it's good to know that we're consulting on them, but you don't need us as a group to make a decision. Items 2 and 3 do need to have a decision made.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And just to summarize again what Lynn is saying, items 2 and 3 require a disapplication to be made for each of them. They require us to consult with all of the schools in the borough. School forum has the responsibility of recommending, based upon that consultation, the position to be adopted for each of those 2 items. We, school forum, will not meet before a disapplication would have to be made, and therefore the recommendation in this particular item of the report, and upon which eventually I'd like us to vote, please, is that we undertake the consultation and we, school forum, adopt whatever the schools that are consulted, what they say is the outcome for 2 and 3. We endorse that automatically, and the borough can then act upon that particular opinion. Do colleagues understand, or forgive me if I hope I haven't explained it badly? Yes, Darren.
Thanks, Paul. A couple of things. It's not about the split site funding, Lynn. It's about the inequities about having a large secondary in an all-through school with a very small primary. It isn't a split site. It's wrong in point 4, but it's right further down on the next page. In terms of the
clumsy wording, Darren, that's apologies. That's my fault.
And the proposed 0.5% transfer. Just a bit of context. Lynn was kind enough to join the last task and finish group for, and one of the issues that we've got is that the task and finish group have said for many years we're very happy to help the local authority to put together a case for how the 0.5% transfer from school block into high needs would be spent, and we are still willing to do that. The wording for the consultation is something that, again, we've said that we would help the local authority with. We haven't heard anything since the meeting last week, and it comes back to one of the points that has been raised many times. That if we're going to ask schools about transferring 0.5% from schools block into high needs, what will that be spent upon? I think that's crucial to it, and that will be in the wording of the consultation. One would hope. And that fundamentally is one of the problems with the 0.5% transfer, is schools not knowing what it's going to be spent upon. So if forum is to agree that we would uphold the outcome of the consultation, then I think there needs to be some clarity on what those consultation questions would be, because I know forum certainly amended those questions in previous years.
Thank you, Darren. Okay, we'll pick up on that. Sal?
Just exactly on that point, we will be looking to be really transparent about what we are requesting that block transfer would fund. More than happy to share it with colleagues in advance of it going out to all schools for comment. Of course, we'll given where we are, we'll need to have a very kind of short turnaround on that commentary to agree that the final wording that goes out, in order that we provide all schools enough time to consider the points in that consultation. But yeah, we're absolutely endeavouring to make sure that we are much clearer about what it is we are asking for that transfer for than we may have been in the past.
Thank you, Sal. Liz?
Forgive me, Lynn. Number 2 and 3 we did last year, so I was just wondering why it's so late, why this hasn't gone out to schools so that we knew their opinion before this meeting.
Yeah, so that's, as I said earlier, that was always our intention, and we recognise that that's, being in the situation we are now, our preference was absolutely to get it out earlier. I think part of it is what we didn't want to do was end up in a situation where we'd multiple different consultation documents going out at different times. We've worked really hard to try and bring the consultation together in a way that gives a really informed overall pack for schools. As I've said, some of it has just been the complexity over the range of things that we might need to consult on and work through. And as Sal has said, obviously just getting that clarity in particular around the 0.5%, because that's a real, as a real critical bit of that consultation, that we weren't ready as a local authority to issue that out with the consultation on our original timeline.
Thank you, Lynn. Liz, does that answer where you were coming from, i.e. we didn't have the time, or the time wasn't available to have a proper consultation and come back to this meeting?
Yeah, I just feel that we haven't had, any more information, so it feels like we just have to repeat the decision that schools had given us last time. It feels, I don't feel comfortable making a different decision than what was asked of last time. So
indeed, and I think that's where Darren is coming from, and I think, to use one of Sal's favourite words at the moment, I think co-production of this, the document that goes out with, for example, us asking Darren or one of the Task and Finish group who are heavily involved in it to take ownership or authorship, co-produced authorship of that consultation would be in our school forum's best interest. Darren, your hand's up again.
Yes, thank you. One issue, two issues as well, is the growth fund, that change that Lynn said about whether it's the level of the growth fund, but matching the need. I think that's important that we have the meeting about that and the contingency prior to the consultation. But also, can I ask what the local authorities position? I think I know the answer to this. What the local authorities' position is, that if the consultation is that the 0.5% isn't transferred, so will the disapplication be put in anyway for the 0.5%?
It is likely that we would pursue a disapplication request in the event that the consultation was not in favour of the 0.5% transfer. That is linked again inextricably to the absolute need that we need to respond to the DSG overspend and how this features a part of safety valve. What we are likely to be proposing and putting forward in terms of that transfer is supporting work that will be part of our work stream to deliver the efficiencies and effectiveness that we need to find as part of our broader safety valve work stream. So it's not going into a black hole, it's about delivery of activity that will assist us in some of our demand management that we need to show through our safety valve programme. So that's the long answer, but the short answer is, Darren, that we are likely, or we would be likely, to submit that disapplication request.
Okay, thank you.
I think, Darren, the key there is, if the if school forum agrees with the transfer, life becomes an awful lot easier. If we disagree with it, then ESFA DFE will take our disagreement with it alongside the application that the borough would make for a disapplication. And they would then, ESFA DFE would then have to consider their position based upon school forum saying, for want of a better word, no, and the borough saying, we would really like to. Okay. I'm very conscious that we're heading towards 12. I don't want to in any way stifle further debate. Colleagues, other questions or issues around this, or would we be prepared to move to a vote? I'm looking, I can't see any further hands up. I'm probably particularly looking for those who are relatively new to school forum and haven't been through this process as we did last year. I can't see any hands going up. Then if I may, what I'd like to do is I'd like to move to a vote from all of the members. We'll do a formal vote so that we've documented it properly. And the vote will be as recommended in the paper that the team have put forward, that a consultation will be undertaken on the 5 items that have been mentioned in 04 on page 56 of our document: school block funding formula, disapplication, proposed 0.5% transfer, notional SEM methodology, and growth fund SEM methodology. 3 of those items are, for want of a better, are to inform future planning, and we as a school forum will have an opportunity to understand the outcomes of that consultation and any possible implication upon the way we structure 23-24's budget. That's item 1, 4 and 5. Items 2 and 3, we would be the vote, and therefore the recommendation would be that we school forum accept whatever the schools that are consulted come back on with regards items 2 and 3. If they say that the request for the disapplication request for the funding for effectively the secondary school is not allowed, then it would not be allowed. And if the schools come back and say that they don't want a 0.5% transfer, then those would be the positions of school forum. One further piece that we will add into here, I think, based upon the comments that Darren was making and Liz was making, is that before that consultation goes out, particularly around 0.3, but I get the feeling possibly around 0.5, there is some engagement between school forum, and I'd like to recommend Darren to do it, school forum and the officer group, to bring further thinking and presentation into the way those 2 particular items are presented. Are there any questions about what we are voting upon? I can't see any hands going up, so I'm going to ask whether you vote. Oh, I've got a hand. Carol. Hi, Carol.
Is it a simple yes or no vote?
Oh, okay. Yes, it will be. It'll be a simple yes or no. We support the fact that we will be bound by the schools, or we don't support it. So if I can go down our list and ask you to vote for or against, i.e. for, we support the fact that whatever the result of the consultation is, we will abide by it, or against, no, we won't abide by it. Okay, so Carol, can I ask please your vote?
I'm against.
Thank you. Karina?
For.
Brian?
For.
Liz?
I think 4, but with a lot of information for the schools, because I do worry that they don't read it and it feels very rushed.
Thank you. Chris, representing Amanda? Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Thank
I was
you.
on mute, sorry.
Ali?
4, thank you.
Julia?
4.
Thank you. Did I see? I saw Luke somewhere. Did I see Luke's name? No, I don't think Luke's not available. Ben, I don't think's on the call. Darren?
Against.
Thank you. Me, Paul Miller, I'm voting for. Shirley?
I'm voting for.
Thank you. Deborah?
For.
Sarah?
For.
Ian?
For.
And Paul Gibson's not here. Morag, I'm pretty sure you have a vote.
I'll vote for.
And Sal?
For.
Thank you. Luciana, are you comfortable with having recorded those votes?
Yes, Paul.
And I'm pretty sure the outcome there was for. There was a majority for us accepting whatever the consultation results are.
Yeah, correct.
Thank you. Lynn, Sal, is there anything further on that particular item?
Not from me, thank you, Chair.
No,
Thanks.
not from me, Paul. Thank you.
And Darren, thank you very much for stepping up and doing the wordsmithing with the team. Liz, in comment to your response, I mean it as nicely as possible. If the presentation of the information is poor, then the outcome is likely to be fairly obvious. So I think it's incumbent upon Lynn, the team, with some support from Darren, to ensure that the information is as good as it can be to achieve the outcomes that I know the officer base would very much like to see. And I think probably there's a feeling that if it is well explained, many of us would agree. So I think it does need to be explained. Lynn.
Sorry, Chair, just to add that also what we wanted to make sure by having a sufficient period of time for the consultation to be open to schools is that so that we can ensure that there are some information sessions or opportunities within that if any individual schools want to discuss through, so that we allow as much opportunity as we can to allow schools to give an informed response.
Sounds very good. Thank you. And I'm sure that will be part of your communication pack. Excellent.
Yes, it will.
Thank you. If there's nothing more on Liz, sorry, you're back again. Yep.
Sorry, it's just to remember that half term, so allowing that time for consultation.
Yeah,
thank you.
Excellent.
Great. And that's item 10. Moving on to item 11, which is the forward plan. I'm hoping you'll have had a quick squint at that page 61 in the document pack. You'll note that several of the items that we've been talking about during the summer have moved on to that December pack. A lot of work on the officer base to get some of those reports available for our meeting in December. If there are no further comments on the forward plan, could I move on to AOB? I've not been notified of any AOB, but in my usual fashion, please can I run down our list and just check that colleagues on the call haven't got anything that they would like to raise. Ali, have you got anything?
No, thank you.
Brian?
No, thank you.
Chris?
No, thank you, Paul.
Carrie?
No, thank you.
Okay, Carol?
No, thank you.
Karina?
No, thank you, Paul.
Thanks. Deborah?
No, thank you, Paul.
Darren?
No, thank you, Paul.
Hayley, hi. And is there anything you'd like to bring up?
No, thank you, Paul.
Helen, thank you again for attending. But anything from your perspective?
No, thank you.
Catherine?
No, thank you.
Ian?
No, thank you, Paul.
Liz?
No, thanks.
Luciana?
Oh, no, thank you.
Lynn?
No, thank you.
Morag?
No, thank you.
Julia?
No, thank you.
Pat, a hello, and anything you'd like to bring up?
No, thank you, Paul.
Piers, we didn't speak.
No, thank you, Paul.
Right. Prue, thank you very much for joining. Is there anything further you'd like to share?
Well chaired, because you're almost exactly on time.
Thank you. Sal?
No, thank you, Paul.
Sarah?
No, thanks, Paul.
Shirley?
No, thank you, Paul.
Okay. And Stacey, right at the bottom there. I hope you've enjoyed being there. Anything that you would like to share with us? Nope, perhaps not then. Thank you all indeed for attending.
Thank you for letting myself and Patrick attend today. It's been really interesting.
Our pleasure. And thank you, everybody. Really appreciate the conversation around the DSG safety valve. I hope nobody felt any of the other conversations were cut short in trying to achieve a 12 o'clock hard end. Thanks, everybody, and look forward to seeing you in